Well, hi and welcome to this video. In this video, we're talking about this question 9 of Indian Society GS paper 1 2023 mains. Let's take a look at this question. Question says, explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. Well, the question is saying suicide is increasing amongst young women in Indian society, and you've got to explain the why part of it. So we're going to be taking a look at, with this answer on a lot of reasons. First of all, we'll start with an introduction which substantiates that, well, yes, that's so. Well, is it really? Well, yes, it is, unfortunately. And there's a Lancet study, 2018, which points it out, the data. So we first substantiate that, yes, that's the fact. And then we go ahead and say, well, these are the reasons. And before we go ahead with the answer, let me explain to you what the central reason is. Right. Now, yes, suicide rates are increasing for women, and that is especially more so in southern India in contrast to northern India. And well, what are the classic set of reasons? All the patriarchal discrimination that does exist, and all the forms of discrimination, and all the changing new forms of problems that we are getting with changing society, globalization, modernization, changing family structure, everything. And especially more in southern India because, well, there are disharmonic systems. What that means to say is a disharmonic system is where we preach something else, like we preach equality in our education, and southern Indian women are more educated, they're better off often, right? In contrast to north Indian, where educational penetration is slightly lesser than southern India, right? So we are teaching harmony, we are teaching ideal equality, all of that stuff. However, what is happening is the pretty much same kind of discriminatory structures continue to exist, patriarchal structures continue to exist, and when the reality clashes between what we're teaching, equality, and what the actual reality is, that creates a much larger divergence. The stress that comes on account of it, the status inconsistency between what is being preached and what is the actual reality. This creates a much larger conflict, cognitive dissonance, if you would call it, right? And creates a lot of problems. Well, so southern India, where there's actually more progress, right, in terms of education, welfare state apparatus working better, but patriarchal discrimination continues to exist. In India, in general, suicide rates are high for women and increasing. So let's take a look at the answer. Well, the NCRB data, National Crime Record Bureau, points out that from 12.7 to 17.5 per 1 lakh, the number of women who are committing suicide, it has increased. And that women in the age bracket of 15 to 39, there's one woman who's ending her life every 1 hour, right? Now, why so? First of all, as we said, status inconsistency. So despite advances in education and empowerment, what continues to happen is that the tension which is evident, that there's a lot of discrimination, structures continue to discriminate, violence continues to happen, despite the fact that education has increased. And now that there's more educational empowerment, but status structure is not improved, there's all that clash. And that's much more in southern India in contrast to northern India. Now, the changing family dynamics, globalization, modernization has changed the way a family works. And we've got these young working family couples with, not enough social support within it. And we find that there are feelings of isolation among young women, wherein the joint family support system is often not available. And this exacerbates further the situation that we're talking about here of distress. The patriarchal structure, which is filled with discrimination of all sorts, right? So we find that married women, especially those who are in early marriages, child marriages, they endure much more violence. There is all manners of gender bias and despair. There are limited economic opportunities for women. Women's participation in the economy has not opened up in the way that it ought to have opened up. I mean, we can look at the gender parity figures, the women's workforce participation rate figures, and it tells us that story, that women's economic participation has not been of what we're talking about, right? Now, there are mental health issues on account of many things, like pressures that women bear, such as to conform to an ideal body type, the pressure with regards to beauty. Women face more pressures as like a dual role. That is to say that much more number of women have taken to these working full-time paid working roles outside the home, and they're also the person who's doing the primary responsibilities inside the home, while men have not parallelly taken the burden inside the home. So it's like, in the name of women empowerment, often women have been doubly burdened with work both outside the home as well as inside the home. So the stressors that way are quite many and increasing, which add up to the situation. The sexual violence, we continue to know that happens and continues to happen according to NCRB data. This is the time of technology and social media, which by its nature fuel depressions, because they kind of do a whole imbalance of your hormones and the manner in which your biology works, and then ultimately leads to both mental and physical health deteriorating, and act as a contributing factor pushing people towards suicides, depressions, right? So all these factors lead to a lot of stress and therefore lead to death by suicide. So to recollect, what we've said is, well, there are the whole set of traditional patriarchal structure discriminations that are happening, the modern stressors that are coming up, but yet still in southern India, one of the main factors why it has higher figures than northern India is that while institutional discrimination continues, we are actually preaching equality. So the distinction between that, the disharmony between that, leads to much more distress and thereby more suicides. Okay. Well, thank you and see you later in the next video.